CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliet Mann. Our top stories. Another vaccine in the global fight against COVID. China's Sinopharm gets the go-ahead for emergency use by the World Health Organization.
Our other headlines: millions of votes are being counted in the UK in one of the most important tests of public opinion in Europe since the pandemic.
European stock markets post record highs, led by Siemens, Adidas and strong German data.
But disappointing jobs news in the United States and a bit of a challenge for President Joe Biden.
And the future of luxury shopping. Live stream lures China's bright young things.
The World Health Organization has just given the green light to a Chinese vaccine for global emergency use.
Sinopharm becomes the sixth vaccine backed by the WHO, the first jab developed by a non-Western country to be approved.
This afternoon, WHO gave emergency use listing to Sinopharm Beijing's COVID-19 vaccine, making it the sixth vaccine to receive WHO validation for safety, efficacy and quality.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent Tony Waterman in Brussels. Tony, what does this listing really mean in practical terms? Who can now administer the Sinopharm jab?
Well, Jamie, here are the details of this recommendation coming from the WHO. They're recommending that the vaccine be used in people 18 years and older. They also said that they found an efficacy rate of about 79%, and that was across all age groups. They did say, however, that data was quite scarce on the age group above 60, but they were not recommending any sort of age limitations because they feel that that there is likely to be the same type of efficacy in that age group. But what they're encouraging is for countries to kind of keep tabs on these immunizations and submit that data so they can update that data. The WHO's technical team has been reviewing Sinopharm now for about 2 weeks. They were looking really at three major things. They were looking at safety, efficacy above 50%, and also that manufacturing standards were pretty high. And they said that they visited a facility that this is all three of those boxes have now been hit, which is why they are now getting this emergency use listing, the first Chinese vaccine to receive that listing and the sixth overall, as you mentioned. Don't forget that Sinovac, another Chinese vaccine, is also under review at the moment. Its review started just earlier this week, but this could really be the beginning of a very big global rollout for Chinese vaccines.
Now, we know that some countries in Europe are already using the Sinopharm jab. Now, with the WHO's backing, will it be rolled out in more countries?
It could be rolled out in a lot more countries. The WHO's approval on this is really a big signal to other national health regulators that this is a safe and effective product. There are countries around the world that just do not have the resources to be able to do quite an in-depth study. They often take their cues from the WHO when it comes to approving medicines and vaccines. So this could really be a tipping point, so to speak, for these Chinese jabs. It also makes them now eligible to be part of the COVAX facility. That is the global program to bring vaccines to mostly low-income countries. Both Sinopharm and Sinovac had actually applied to be part of that program. We know that it's suffering from a shortage of vaccines and bottlenecks at the moment, a lot of that having to do with what's taking place in India. There's an export ban, and that program is quite reliant on AstraZeneca, among other vaccines. So this could really be the beginning of things being rolled out. It also lends a lot of credibility, global credibility to these Chinese vaccines. Sinopharm had been criticized by some for not providing enough detailed data on these late-stage clinical trials. There was also questions raised by the country's top health expert about the efficacy of Chinese vaccines overall. So this a very good day for China's biotech industry, which has been working on these vaccines, the first one now to be approved.
Let's just flip this back to the EU, because you've reported extensively on this programme over many months now on the EU's rather slow and ponderous vaccine rollout. Will this be greeted warmly in the EU and in particular in Brussels?
Well, they're already looking. The EU health regulator is already looking into these vaccines. Sinovac, in particular, is under rolling review. So that means that when and if they put in for formal application, it would speed up the process. The one thing that's interesting to note here, when it comes to the EU, when it comes to global travel, when it opens up later this summer, is that these green digital passports, these COVID passports that the Commission is trying to pull together for the Union come June, there is an option in there to extend the acceptable vaccines to ones that are WHO approved. So if Sinopharm now has this green light and starts getting used, those people are going to be able to travel potentially into Europe this summer. It's also other countries looking to perhaps use this vaccine going forward. We know it's being used in Hungary already. The Prime Minister there, Viktor Orban, inoculated with the Sinopharm vaccine about 2 months ago. So this could be also the starting point for countries in Europe to start seriously thinking about using these Chinese vaccines.
Tony Waterman in Brussels, thank you very much.
And Tony mentioned there that we'll be talking to Penelope Lish in Budapest a little bit later on. Now Sinopharm's vaccine's become the first Chinese vaccine to be approved by the WHO. The company's chairperson says it will increase productivity to meet demand.
Demand for COVID-19 vaccines is high, far exceeding the demand for our usual vaccine products. Our initial design was for 100 million doses, which was later expanded to 1 billion, and in the third phase to 3 billion. In addition to the 2 biological institutes in Beijing and Wuhan, we also have 4 biological institutes in the cities of Changchun, Lanzhou, Chengdu, and Shanghai, which have joined in production of packaging. We are currently in the third phase of workshop construction, which will greatly increase our output. At the same time, we have made contact with a number of foreign countries who will also take part in packaging. Until now, CNBG has produced the most coronavirus vaccines sent to foreign countries, 200 million doses. Sinopharm CNBG's vaccines have been approved for registration, marketing, and emergency use in more than 60 countries and regions and have helped 80 countries, and more than 100 countries plan to use it.
Now the rest of the day's news, and millions of votes are being counted across the UK after elections in England, Scotland and Wales. It's one of the biggest tests of public opinion in Europe on vaccine rollout efficiency and, of course, Brexit. Many results are not expected till later, but Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party has already gained an even bigger majority in Parliament. The Conservatives won a new seat in the town of Hartlepool, breaking a decades-long hold by Labour and tightening Johnson's grip on traditional opposition heartland areas. It's the biggest swing of votes for a governing party at a by-election since the Second World War.
Let's talk to our correspondent, Nuid Jabarkil, who's in Westminster. Nuid, early days yet with so many results still being counted, but what's your sense of where this is going so far?
Yeah, I think a good indicator, Juliet, is what the leaders of the respective parties are doing. Boris Johnson went first to the West Midlands in England. Now he was up in Hartlepool a short while ago meeting the victor there, who's just become the first person since 1964 to represent the Conservative Party in that part of England. In contrast, Keir Starmer, the leader of the main opposition in Westminster, he refused to take questions when he left his house this morning. He has spoken since in the past half an hour or so. He said this, quote, "I'm bitterly disappointed in the results and I take full responsibility for the results." And he went on to say, "I will take full responsibility for fixing things." So already It's looking at damage limitation and looking at what's coming. And as you say, the results are still coming in. We've had that major election from the major result from the by-election in Hartlepool, but lots of other smaller seats across the UK coming in, across England, Scotland and Wales at least. These local council seats which matter to people because essentially it's about things in their local communities, whether it's picking up rubbish or council tax and things like that. So those results still coming in. They will happen over Saturday and Sunday, but so far it's left a big question for the Labour Party about where it goes next and whether or not Keir Starmer is the right man to lead it. It's gone from bad to worse for the UK's Labour Party. Another crushing defeat at the polls for the country's main opposition. More than 5,000 seats were up for grabs at these local elections.
Gillian Wendy Mortimer, commonly known as Jill Mortimer, is duly elected. Congratulations, Jill.
The most high-profile one in Hartlepool went to the ruling Conservatives for the first time since 1964.
Immensely proud to be the first Conservative MP in Hartlepool for 57 years. Not only that, I am the first woman ever to be elected as MP for this town.
The by-election represented the one seat on offer in the UK's Parliament, but across England it was a similar story of the Conservatives gaining ground, often at the expense of Labour. A sense of déjà vu after the 2019 general election that saw seat after seat in the north of England fall to Boris Johnson's party. The latest results simply boosting his already firm grip on power. In recent weeks, the Prime Minister's faced a series of allegations of corruption and poor conduct. Some of that behaviour is currently being investigated. But the UK's recent success around COVID vaccines and his tough line on Brexit have won him support. For his opposite number here, though, Keir Starmer and his Labour Party face some soul-searching after yet another devastating loss. There are other important votes to watch, including the Mayor of London, with incumbent Sadiq Khan expected to hold on to power. And in Scotland and Wales, devolved parliaments are being elected, which have the powers to make their own laws on issues like health and education. With the ruling Scottish National Party and several others vowing for a second independence referendum, calls for Scotland's breakaway from the United Kingdom could gain momentum.
I hope Scotland, the vote counts this time, you know, and if the country wants to go forward and be independent, it's a good decision. It's the time is right for it, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm quite happy staying where we are at the moment, and that's fine by me.
I think it'll be strongly with the SNP, but there'll be some surprise tactical voting to make sure it's maybe not as clear-cut as they think it's going to be.
Vote counting began on Friday and results across England, Wales and Scotland are expected to keep coming in over the weekend. There'll be plenty to digest once they're all counted, but the early signs suggest more trouble for Labour, with Boris Johnson's election record strengthening once again.
Now, we had a voter in your package there saying the vote counts this time. I mean, these elections could be a first step towards independence for Scotland and the breakup of the UK. What are the results looking like in Scotland, as far as you can see?
Yeah, that's got to be the bigger concern for Boris Johnson here. I think the results so far that have come in, the SNP, the Scottish National Party, has won one seat from Labour. Not much change elsewhere. Another 19 seats it's held on. We're expecting about 50, almost 50, 48 seats to be announced on Friday. More to come on Saturday. In Scotland, there are 129 seats up for grabs in the Scottish Parliament. That's a devolved Parliament which has plenty of power now, increasing power. The Scots want it to have even more. It's not just the Scottish National Party either. I think the concern for Boris Johnson will be other parties are also pushing for independence, including the Green Party and the newly formed Alba Party, headed by Alex Salmond, the predecessor to Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister of Scotland. There was concern that that may fracture the votes. So far things are holding, but it will be interesting to see whether A, the SNP can form a majority in itself. If it can, then they're likely to come back here knocking for a second independence referendum. If not, then then they're going to have to look at maybe joining a coalition. And the Greens is one option, possibly even the Alba Party, given what's happened with Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon. That could be interesting. But just on that vote back in 2014, that independence referendum in Scotland, David Cameron, Prime Minister at the time, said it would be, quote, a once-in-a-generation vote. It's only 6 years later. That was a narrow vote. 55% said they wanted to stay in the UK, 44% wanted to leave. It's only 6 years later. And after Brexit, the dynamics have changed completely. And we could see, depending on what happens in Scotland in the next 24 to 48 hours, the independence issue creep up again. Juliet.
Certainly is. Nui Jabakul, thanks very much.
And we'll have much more on the UK election later in this programme when I'll be talking to Gito Harry, Boris Johnson's former advisor. You're watching CGTN. Also ahead, we're going to be live in Downing Street. We're all going on a summer holiday. The UK outlines the countries it deems safe for travel. We'll tell you all about it in just a couple of minutes.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire. To bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. And remember, CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
Now, the UK is setting out the safe destinations for foreign holidays, the so-called green countries with low or no risk of reintroducing coronavirus to the UK. For a population emerging from lockdowns, the possibility of a summer holiday in the sun has been keenly awaited. The UK's Transport Minister is speaking at Downing Street right now. We may cross over and have a listen to that. Are you going to go to Downing Street or... No, we might come back to Downing Street in just a few moments, but in the meantime, let's talk to our correspondent, Paul Barber, who's following the story. Paul, this is happening right now, and it looks as if it's going to be a bit vague. We're still looking at this so-called traffic light system. What do you know?
Yes, that's right, Jamie. The UK's ban on non-essential foreign travel is due to come to an end in 10 days' time on May the 17th, 4 months after the country's third lockdown came into being. People very keen to know if they can have any sort of holiday abroad this summer. We are getting a bit more information now from the government. As you said, the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, giving a press conference at Downing Street now, and it has set out more details of its so-called traffic light system, which organises countries into 3 categories of COVID safety: red, amber and green. We have a bit more clarity now on which countries are going to be in that all-important green list, which means that you will not have to have you'll not have to go into quarantine when you return to the UK. You would have to have a test 2 days after and a pre-departure test as well. We were expecting something like 30 or 40 countries to be in this green list, but it's actually just around 12, we believe, including Portugal, Malta, Gibraltar, Morocco and Israel, and we believe some Caribbean countries such as Jamaica. Pretty disappointing to a lot of people in the UK that the main European holiday destinations like France and Spain and Italy and Greece are not in that green list. They're on the amber list, and Turkey, a very popular destination for tourism, has been moved onto the red list along with the Maldives and Nepal. Grant Shapps, the Transportation Secretary, saying that it was essentially a fortress that the UK has been able to create through its vaccine success, but that other countries around the world have not been able to replicate that success, notably India lately. It has a very tight list of criteria to organise these countries into red, amber or green. They include the coronavirus infection rates, the prevalence of variants of concern, the status of the vaccine rollouts and the reliability of the country's data and genomics testing facilities. So it's a very, very cautious, very tentative first step into allowing foreign travel this summer.
Paul, critics will say that we should be concerned about the new variants. What's the UK government saying on that?
Jamie, there is increasing worry and concern in the UK about the Indian variant, or to be more specific, one version of the Indian variant, the B.1.6172 variant. It's been called now by Public Health England a variant of concern. That means that it's spreading more quickly than the other Indian variants here in the UK. No evidence yet that it's more deadly or vaccine resistant. Cases of it have increased from 202 to 520 in just the past week, especially in London and the northwest of England. Prime Minister Boris Johnson saying that the government needs to respond carefully to outbreaks of the India variant, and he said that we're doing a huge amount to make sure that when we do find outbreaks of the Indian variant, that we do surge testing and door-to-door testing. So very much a reminder that the coronavirus is still with us, and widespread travel around the world is something that's probably still quite a long way away.
Paul Barber, thanks for that.
Well, let's stay with flying and holidays. The international airline industry has been particularly badly affected by the pandemic. IAG, the owner of British Airways and Spanish airline Iberia, says it's confident travel will recover from July after posting a loss of $1.4 billion in the first quarter. Rahul Pathak's in Madrid.
So, the health report for IAG. Still poorly, but showing small signs of improvement. Friday's announcement of a net loss of $1.3 billion for the first quarter of 2021 compared with a $2 billion loss this time last year. Passenger numbers remain at record low levels at just 19.6% of pre-COVID levels in 2019.
To be honest, it's not a big surprise. While you still have these big restrictions on travel imposed by the governments, these strategic decisions are very important. Realistically, the travelers also need to have confidence to return to some normality. So evidently, it can't return to normal. Right now, the airline industry is practically dead.
Now, 12 months ago, IAG was forced to ground most of its planes as coronavirus took off around the world. Now, while Friday's results show a slight improvement, the ongoing uncertainty over travel restrictions means the company says it only expects to fly 25% of its 2019 capacity for the rest of the year. With summer season fast approaching, much depends on when countries decide to ease COVID travel rules. IAG calling on governments to be more ambitious in getting global travel back on track.
The most important thing is urgent collective political and strategic decisions. Above all, the travelers themselves need to have the confidence to return, thanks to things like safe travel corridors between different countries. We need to lose things like quarantine restrictions so that people can move between different continents.
With the coronavirus situation in countries like India, traveller confidence is sure to be affected in the short term. IAG and the airline industry as a whole may have to hold on tight through the continued turbulence and hope government policy will allow it to navigate out of the current crisis. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
OK, let's bring you a bit more on this breaking news about the World Health Organization giving the green light to a Chinese vaccine. This is the first vaccine from a non-Western country to get the go-ahead from the WHO. Hungary is one of the countries already using Sinopharm in its vaccination programme amid the vaccine crunch in Europe. Let's talk to our correspondent Penelope Lurch in Budapest. Penelope, this is all rather academic there, isn't it? Because Hungary has been using Sinopharm vaccines for ages.
That's absolutely right. The Sinopharm vaccine was rolled out in Hungary in February. Prime Minister Viktor Orban took a shot himself, had his first inoculation, which was filmed as a social media video, encouraging other people to trust the Hungarian experts, he said, and have this vaccine as well. It has played a major role in Hungary's vaccine rollout. Currently, Hungary is one of the highest countries for their levels of coronavirus vaccination in Europe, and that's a title they want to hold on to. They've, according to the government, owe a lot of that to making sure that they could reach out to Russia and also China for Sinopharm and make those orders in time to start the vaccination program rolling. Already, as of today, more than 4.2 million people have had a vaccine in Hungary. Here's a little more on how the entire program and Sinopharm are going here. Coming off a plane from China, these were some of the first Sinopharm vaccines to land on Hungarian soil. The nation became the first in the European Union to use the Chinese-made vaccine back in February. Prime Minister Viktor Orban released a video showing his own vaccination, encouraging others to have the jab.
Please register and get vaccinated. This is the only possible way of protection. Just as there are tens of thousands of Hungarians in Serbia, now we have received thousands of Chinese vaccines here in Hungary. Trust the Hungarian experts.
More than 1 million doses arrived during March and April. The largest shipment, carrying 600,000, touched down days ago, with Sinopharm now available at all vaccination sites.
Anyone who has registered can schedule an appointment to get the Sinopharm vaccine at any vaccination sites. I encourage everyone to take advantage of this opportunity as much as possible.
Student Rebecca Bayo was one of those having her first shot.
I got the Chinese one. It was perfectly fine. It didn't hurt much, so really it was great. It was a good experience.
Hungary has one of the highest coronavirus vaccination rates in the European Union, with the government basing decisions to reopen the economy on the number of people who've had a vaccine.
People are very happy to get vaccinated. We have people from all age groups, young and seniors, and we see that they are happy to get jabbed and be protected against COVID.
While the Prime Minister continually pins the success of the vaccination program on extra doses coming from China and Russia, many scientists have accused the government of promoting misinformation. Recent government data shared on social media suggests Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines aren't as safe as the Sputnik and Sinopharm jabs, but critics say the information lacks context. Already 37% of the population have had at least one dose of vaccine, but there are concerns a lack of transparency may put people off.
The information that people get is really mixed.
So far, 1.7 million Sinopharm vaccines have arrived in Hungary from an order of 5 million, enough to vaccinate a quarter of the population with 2 doses. So as you heard there, the vaccine program in Hungary is going along very quickly. The government's very pleased with the number of people who've been vaccinated so far. Sinopharm has played a major role in that. There's 5 million doses that have been ordered so far. Around 2 million have already arrived. We see a couple of 100,000 arriving in the country most weeks. So it seems that the rate of that vaccination program will continue, partially on the basis of these vaccines they've been able to import to China, something no other country in the EU decided to do at the time. As you heard, there's also been some concerns about the transparency of the Hungarian government when it comes to all of their vaccines on offer and possible side effects. It is a good thing for Hungary now today that we've heard this vaccine has been given emergency approval by WHO. It should give people more confidence. It may also give people more confidence in being able to travel in the future. We know there could be concerns with Hungarians who've had the Sinopharm and Sputnik vaccines being able to cross borders into the EU, as these vaccines haven't been approved by the EMA yet. But hopefully going forward it means a much more positive outcome, and certainly more vaccines for Hungary in the government's eyes means a sign of hope, and hopefully heading towards the end of the pandemic.
Penelope Lurch in Budapest, thank you very much. And let's stay with vaccines. Germany says it cannot support US proposals to waive patents on COVID vaccines, saying the move would hinder research into new treatments, announcing that the third wave of the infection was broken in Europe's biggest economy. Germany's health minister said patents on drugs was not the biggest obstacle to vaccine rollouts.
The main question here is not one of intellectual property. The main question is one of production capacity, particularly when it comes to the production of mRNA vaccines. This is not something you can simply do somewhere, somehow, in some factory, whether that's in Germany, China or Chile, just by having a license. This is really about technology transfer. You have to know what you're doing, and usually it works best when it takes the shape of cooperation.
Well, markets now, and earnings season continues to wow here in Europe. Companies are smashing expectations as the continent continues to recover. Today, several of the biggest companies in Germany are in the spotlight. Now, let's start with luxury car maker Bmw. Revenue jumped more than 15% in the first 3 months of the year compared to the same period last year. They reported strong demand in China, but warned that future earnings could be hit by the rising cost of raw materials. And don't forget that the whole auto sector is struggling with the global shortage of semiconductor chips. Electronics giant Siemens, they also posted a strong financial quarter. Revenue jumped 6% compared to the same time last year. Now, the company says growth and production are back to their pre-pandemic levels in both China and in Europe. And sportswear giant Adidas, they posted a revenue increase of 20% in the first quarter. And they've raised their outlook for the rest of the year. Shares in the firm soared more than 8% in Frankfurt, which is where our correspondent Ryan Thompson is standing by. Good to see you, Ryan. Let's start with Adidas. I think sales in China grew by 156% over the first 3 months of the year. But we know that many clothing retailers have been hit hard during the pandemic. So what do these results tell us?
Yeah, a great start to the year for Adidas, $6.5 billion in sales, and much of that coming from e-commerce and internet platforms. In quarter one, those types of sales were up about 43% on the year. If you keep in mind, many of these European consumers are sitting at home adhering to lockdowns, but the household income that they actually have has not subsided much. They can't go traveling, they can't go to restaurants, but what they can do is they can go online and they can go engage in online purchasing. Online sales for a brand or a retailer like Adidas are much more lucrative because you just don't have the costs associated with in-person retail shopping. There's no staff, you don't have to pay to keep the lights on, and that has been good for retailers like Adidas and these quarter one profits. You mentioned China there. They have seen strong growth in quarter one despite a retailer, a slight boycott by some consumers at one point during the year. Interestingly, to compare Adidas to Nike, one of their big brothers in the United States. Often they are at each other's arms comparing profits, but for quarter one, we've seen Nike's results, but Adidas has really blown them out of the park in terms of sales, profits, and the projections for the rest of the year.
Well, we need to get a new pair of trainers, I think. Now, let's look at Siemens, because they say there's strong momentum going into the rest of the year. But what are investors making of their results?
Investors are absolutely buying into it. Here in Frankfurt at the Deutsche Börse, stocks for Siemens closing up over 3%. There's lots of good news to go around. They are particularly excited about a full-year profit and sales report being raised, not to mention this quarter two earnings report actually beating expectations. But I think there's one line here that particularly has investors excited, and that is the fact that growth and production is back to pre-COVID levels, not just in China, But here in Europe, they've been able to get much of their factories back to work. The workforce is engaged. They are signing contracts, and they are really headed strong. You mentioned the global chip shortage. That is one cause for concern for a firm like Siemens, who is spread out across a lot of industries, not to mention the automakers here in Germany and the technology that they develop for them. They say at the moment they have seen no effect of that, but they are keeping their eye on it cautiously, and it is a tense situation, certainly.
You mentioned the auto sector, so let's dig in a little bit to BMW. What's been driving their recovery?
Driving the BMW recovery are Chinese and American consumers. In the United States, BMW is really seeing a huge push in terms of people buying pre-used or leased vehicles, giving them a second life. That's been good for BMW. In China, it's really been across the brand, but notably in electric vehicles. They have doubled their sales there. Here in Europe, though, not so much a pretty picture. Sales are down here in their home country of Germany, down by as much as 5% for the first quarter. In their earnings report as well, they did mention concerns about the semiconductor shortage. They say their CFO said that they have a close eye on it, certainly. They've lost no production to it, but it is something for them to be increasingly worried about, because across all firms, whether you're talking about consumers or cars, these are basically high-powered machines that BMW is developing. So as much as they need them for actually to get the engine started, they also need them for the onboard computers. So it's likely to at least weigh on them into the coming months.
It is all about the tech. Ryan Thompson, thank you for the update.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the United States adds 250,000 new jobs, but Joe Biden will be disappointed. We're live in New York next.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, radio loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy idea.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Juliette Mann. Our top stories. Another vaccine in the global fight against COVID. China's Sinopharm gets the go-ahead for emergency use by the World Health Organization.
Millions of votes are being counted in the UK in one of the most important tests of public opinion in Europe since the pandemic. Well, let's get more on that story now. The UK election. Git O'Harry was a former advisor to Boris Johnson and the BBC's former chief political correspondent. Gitto, good to see you. Still early days, really. So many results still awaited. But if this was a vote about, among other things, the successful vaccination rollout programme in the UK, I wonder what the ramifications are beyond the UK.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Somebody joked at the heart of government, 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister lives, a few weeks ago, that when people get vaccinated, it seems to instill in them some sort of desire to vote Conservative. Now, that was a joke back then, but it does look from various tests of public opinion over the last 24 hours that it definitely works. If people have been vaccinated, they feel positive, they feel more supportive of the government, they feel more optimistic about the future, and coupled with some good news about economic data in the UK, that seems to have served the government of the day well. And across the rest of Europe, that would imply that governments that have handled things badly will get punished, those that are doing well will get rewarded.
You know Boris Johnson well. If the Conservatives are seen to have had a good election, and we still don't know the full result in England and Wales, but let's say Scotland's SNP win a mandate for another independence referendum, Boris Johnson's legacy will be the breakup of the UK, won't it?
It's a really tough one. What is emerging at the moment, and it's still fairly early days, but different parts of the UK are going in different directions. If you look at England as opposed to the UK overall, it's been a very, very good result so far for Boris Johnson and the Conservatives. They have won in places they never used to get a look in. They have done that despite a grueling, difficult and personally difficult few weeks for the Prime Minister. But in Scotland, so far, it's looking good for Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP. At the very least, it looks like they're going to be in power for a fourth consecutive term. That gives them a lot of moral authority. And yes, that does put the potential breakup of the UK on the cards. And despite the failure of the Labour Party in England, the Labour Party in Wales seems to be holding up pretty well so far, and one way or the other, maybe with the help of a smaller party, but it does look as if they will remain in power in Wales.
Oppositions are, in conventional wisdom, supposed to win elections from incumbent governments. The Conservatives have been in power in the UK for years. The opposition Labour Party have lost a seat in the northern town of Hartlepool. What does the left have to do to win back voters?
It's going to be a very difficult question for them for a long time, and a lot of soul-searching. There were high hopes about Keir Starmer, a professional, a trained barrister with a forensic mind and ability to put Boris Johnson on the back foot in the House of Commons, where debate can be quite fiery, but clearly not connecting, not with those swing voters in the middle, but with traditional Labour voters. So what has happened is the Conservative Party in the UK has managed to win over people who used to vote almost unthinkingly for the Labour Party, and that does change the dynamics quite dramatically. It's a different challenge for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party to try and win back. It's a bigger challenge for them, and it suggests that the gains that the Conservatives made 18 months ago, which could largely be seen at the time in the context of the Brexit debate, seems to have turned into something bigger than that. There seems to be a following, at the very least, for the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, if not for the Conservative Party, in areas that were traditionally very, very solidly Labour. And that means the map of modern Britain is looking far more complicated, far more interesting in some ways.
Git O'Harry in London, thank you very much.
China's exports surged more than expected in April as global demand increased. Shipments abroad soared about 32% last month, smashing the 24% forecast, and that was thanks to a sharp rise in electronics and medical masks. At the same time, China's imports rose by 43%, the most in a decade, as domestic consumption recovers.
Shares in Beyond Meat are tumbling on Wall Street. The company lost more money than expected in the first quarter. The firm says demand for its plant-based products has yet to recover from the pandemic.
Intercontinental Hotels Group says customer demand is increasing in the US and China. The company, which owns brands including the Crowne Plaza and Holiday Inn, says bookings increased towards the end of the first quarter as lockdowns were eased in various countries. The US economy added over 250,000 new jobs in April, but that's far below what economists had been hoping for. The latest non-farm payroll figures will be a setback for the president. Joe Biden's been on a trip to the American South to promote his infrastructure spending plans. Let's go to the New York Stock Exchange and our correspondent, John Terrick. Good to see you, John. Now, those US jobs numbers well below forecast. Has that miss spooked the markets?
Not as far as I can tell. You would think that they would be spooked, wouldn't you? Hello, Juliet, by the way. Hello, Jamie.
Hello.
You'd think they'd be spooked, wouldn't you? You'd think there'd be a huge sell-off. The complete opposite has happened here. Shortly after the number came out at about 8:30 local time, the market actually opened at 9:30. Up with the Dow Jones, up with the S&P 500. Record territory. We've got the Dow up 0.5% at the moment. The S&P up almost 1%. Now, I have to tell you that we were all absolutely staggered this morning when this figure came out. I have several producers who look after me. One of them is called Nanuka. She wrote to me last week and she said, have you seen that the US is likely to put on 1 million jobs in the month of April? I said, oh, great, I'll talk that up. That's fantastic, thank you. So we were all expecting almost 1 million or just over 1 million jobs to have been added in the month of April. And then when the number came out, we were about to write it down. Oh, my word. 266,000, that's like a third of what it was supposed to be. And the worst thing really was that the unemployment rate ticked up a notch when it was expected to tick down a notch. And I have to tell you, Juliet, this came against all the data that we have been receiving and that I've been talking about on our program in the recent days. It goes against the feeling here in America at the moment. It goes against the mood. I mean, there is huge pent-up demand after this COVID era, which is now passing here in America in all ways, to buy things, to employ people. And I think it just comes down to the fact that many Americans are simply not ready to go back to work yet. And I think economists thought that they would be. And I think it boils down to three things. First of all, health worries. Here in New York, the mayor said that all his staff in the municipal authority have to come back to the office last Monday. There was a huge protest last Saturday, people saying, no, we're not coming, you haven't sorted out the air conditioning, you haven't sorted the routes around the office, all that sort of thing. And I think many Americans are just terrified of COVID-19 and coming back to city environments like that. So I think so that's part of it. On top of that, I think the schools were not as open as they are now when these figures were being prepared, and people still have childcare issues. And the third thing is rather more controversial to say, but it looks as if it may be true. People are getting $1,400 stimulus checks in the mail. They're getting enhanced unemployment benefits, and they're also getting other entitlements. And it does look as if people, particularly in low-paid jobs, have simply said, we're not coming back to work yet. And we have anecdotal evidence of this from employers restaurants in particular, who want to reopen and fully staff, and they can't because the staff won't come back. Republican governors around the country are saying it's the same in their Republican states. They can't actually get people into the jobs. In my own personal life, I have a friend who is an employer. She was faced with an employee this week who simply said, look, I've got a $1,400 stimulus check. I'm going to take the month off now, and this is more than I get paid by you. I'm going to take the month off, and I'm going to get a new job when I spend all this money. So, that's anecdotal, but this now looks as if it might be proof that that kind of stuff has been going on, Juliet.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because after the financial crisis, we're in a very different situation. Now there's loads of funds sloshing about. So it's really different, lots of different factors in there. Let's talk about Biden. He's got these big plans to boost the economy. Tell us about his spending spree.
Yeah. Well, Biden's just said at the White House that the job numbers today underscore the need for the American jobs plan. And Janet Yellen, who's the Treasury Secretary, has just been telling CNBC that she thought always that it would be a long road to recovery. I mean, Biden was in Louisiana in the south of the country yesterday, very, very long way from the White House. He was selling his rescue plan, his family plan, his infrastructure plan, which I think is now the Green New Deal as well. I think they folded the Green New Deal into the infrastructure plan because Americans don't like talk of Green New Deals. So he's out on the road selling it to people. It's a bit of a thankless task, really, because no one's really listening. He makes television news, but no one really cares. what he's trying to sell is changing the way that the economics are in the States. We've had trickle-down economics for 40 years. He wants to make it fairer for ordinary working people. That's what he's trying to do. But you know, Juliet, the thing you have to remember is that all this talk about the rescue plan, the family plan, the infrastructure, it's $6 or $7 trillion worth of spending. Not 1 cent has yet been approved by the Congress, and there could be a big fight coming up. So all of today's news plays into that, Julia.
I tell you what, you say no one's really listening to Biden. We are all on the edge of our seats listening to you. John Terrett in New York, thank you very much.
And let's stay with the United States because China has urged the US to return to multilateralism at a virtual forum hosted by the United Nations Security Council. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says all sides would be glad to see Washington contribute to world peace. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is also attending this forum. It's their second meeting after a rather tense encounter in Alaska in March.
And China says it's highly unlikely that a rocket falling back to Earth will cause any damage. The rocket was launched about a week ago, carrying a core module for China's future space station. The US says it's hard to predict where and when it will land and warns it could crash onto an inhabited area. China says the risk is extremely low.
The rocket has a special technical design. Most of the components will be burned up during the re-entry. The chances of causing harm to aviation or on the ground is extremely low. The authorities will inform the public of the situation in a timely manner.
The United Nations has called for an independent investigation into a Brazilian police operation against drug traffickers. The resulting shootout left 25 people dead, including a police officer. The UN human rights spokesman said it was the latest incident of disproportionate force. People targeted in the raid tried to escape across rooftops as police arrived in armoured vehicles.
India has reported another record daily rise in coronavirus. Officials say just over 414,000 people were confirmed as newly infected. The number of people who died from the disease increased by just under 4,000 in the last 24 hours. The World Health Organization says India accounts for nearly half the cases reported worldwide last week and a quarter of deaths.
Japan has extended a state of emergency in Tokyo and 3 other areas until the end of May. Authorities are trying to stem a surge in coronavirus, which they say is fueled by the spread of virus variants. It's just 77 days before the Olympics are due to start in the city.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, cash for COVID jabs. How much is Serbia paying if you get both vaccinations?
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Serbia says every person above the age of 16 who gets 2 COVID vaccine jabs will receive the equivalent of $30 US.
Authorities are trying to speed up inoculations as critics of vaccination become more vocal. CGTN's Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
Just a day after the announcement, vaccination started at the new vaccination point in one of Belgrade's largest shopping malls. On top of $30 US government incentive for every vaccinated citizen, the first 100 who came here received a voucher for the additional $30 US. In a country struggling with not so great economic situation, hundreds waited from early in the morning to get their jab and the voucher. According to local media reports, even the police had to be called to calm the situation down. Yet, the authorities are happy to see that their scheme works and that the people are responding. Serbia aims to enter the fall with reached so-called herd immunity. That will start its economy and help life return to normal before the end of the year. According to official reports, almost 3.7 million COVID-19 vaccine doses are administered thus far in the country, while over 1/4 of entire population is fully inoculated. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Belgrade.
China is well on the path to becoming the world's biggest luxury market. Despite the pandemic, the country's luxury consumption in 2020 rose by nearly 50%.
And Generation Z, or Generation Z, those born between 1995 and 2010, are set to be the top buyers this decade. Huang Fei reports.
Every night at 8 o'clock, as lights go out in most offices, the work of a live streamer begins. This is prime-time entertainment for millions of Chinese shoppers, eager to get their hands on the latest luxury items.
My viewers are from all ages, but most of them are born after 1995. They stay up late and like to check out the latest trends before they go to bed. During a 5-hour live stream, I can sell $150,000 worth of products.
Chai Chai works for luxury e-tailer Suku. The company has a 7,000 square meter live streaming base in Beijing, where up to 300 hosts can demonstrate products at the same time.
But for some, attracting customers online has been a bumpy shift. Last year, Louis Vuitton's first ever live stream on the Little Red Book was criticized over poor video quality and a shoddy backdrop. And that is why companies like Suku believe having dedicated broadcasting infrastructure will be an advantage.
Last year, Suku teamed up with short video platform Kuaishou to launch a 24-hour live streaming channel. It sold nearly $15 million in luxury goods within the first 5 hours.
We've invested a lot in infrastructure, and we welcome other companies to use our space. I believe luxury retail isn't about selling products cheap and fast. It's about promoting a lifestyle, so it should be multi-dimensional.
China's under-25s are already snapping up 15% of all luxury products sold in the country, outpacing their international peers. A recent survey shows that China's older Gen Zers, who are now part of the country's workforce, spend a much higher proportion of their income, about 3 times more than the Western counterparts. Having grown up in China's economic boom, the youngsters are more optimistic, highly informed, and patriotic. Analysts say that adding Chinese elements to the luxury product is key to winning their hearts and cash.
Localization of the design and localization of the product, instead of trying to do the mass marketing as you would have in the past, but more connect with the bright social media influencers, because these are the people that the generation people they associate themselves to.
Connecting with customers online is hard work. Chai Chai's longest live stream went on for 13 hours straight, but it pays off handsomely. The key to amassing hundreds of thousands of active and loyal buyers, she says, is getting the message right. On CGTN, Beijing.
That's your weekend sorted?
Absolutely, I'll be watching and buying.
And buying.
And spending.
Spend.
Yeah.
A reminder of our breaking news before we go. The World Health Organization has given the green light to Chinese vaccine Sinopharm for global emergency use.
This afternoon, WHO
gave emergency use listing to Sinopharm Beijing's COVID-19 vaccine, making it the 6th vaccine to receive WHO validation for safety, efficacy, and quality.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com. Do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as cgtn.com and the CGTN app. From all of the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.